So this week we're working on a couple of different skirt styles. I've already videotaped and posted instructions on how to do a flared skirt. Now we're going to do what's called a Gored skirt. It's G-O-R-E, Gore. And it has a lot of flare to it, but it's done with panels. So I'm going to bring this close so you can really see it. And you can see that you have a center panel. This panel is just cut on the fold. And you can see here's your seam going down the princess line. But then it really flares out at the bottom, like from the hip down. You want this to be fairly fitted from the waist to the hips. And then the fullness is all below that. In the back, you can leave it open for a zipper. Most of the time, this would have a zipper in the back. Sometimes I've seen zippers on the side. If you're using a fabric where you really don't want to interrupt the pattern of the fabric, you could put the zipper on the side. And this is what's referred to as a 6-panel gore. So you have a center front, you have a side front. So the side front goes from the princess line to the side seam. And again, it's pretty close to the body until we get to the hip area, and then the panels flares out. You have a side back panel that's the same, and then we have the center back panel. And even though this is cut into 2 pieces, we're counting it as one piece because it could be cut on the fold. So basically, this is what your little skirt is going to look like. It should have sort of a flirty kind of flouncy feel to the bottom. And then you would normally put a waistband on it or a facing. And so I'm going to show you what the pattern should look like. And then there'll be 2 videos showing draping some of these panels. So your pattern will have 4 pieces to it. This is my center front, and you can see that it's marked to cut on the fold. When you cut something on the fold, you're generally on the lengthwise grain. And you can see that the panel really comes out at the bottom. It's straight in the middle, but at the side. Make sure that when you're draping this that you use notches. You're going to have 6 panels that are cut out laying down, and you've got to know which panel attaches to which panel. And when we look at the side panels, you'll notice that they look the same, so you're not going to know which one goes where if you haven't made notches and clearly marked your patterns. I like having the hip line when I'm draping so that I have that horizontal line so that I know that my patterns are on grain. So this is the front, so we would use notches that are 1 line. Now, the panel that attaches to that, the notches should match, so they're both 1s. The part of the panel that's going to attach to the side seam has a double notch. The side front, your grain line is going to be right down the center. That's where you're going to cut this out. You won't be laying it, crooked. You're going to be laying it perfectly straight like this. So this is your side panel. You want to mark your pattern that you're going to cut too. Your pattern should all have your seam allowances added, hems. This is a 1/4 scale or 1/2 scale pattern. And so I've got a 1/2 inch hem and I've got 1/4 inch seams. If you're working in full scale, you want to have 1/2 inch seams and a 1 inch hem. It's a good idea that with patterns too, when you start having multiple pattern pieces, that you start numbering them. And we generally start in the front, so like the front center would be a number 1. The next panel would be a number 2. That way, when you get into patterns, I've made clothing where I have like 28 pattern pieces to make an 8-gore skirt with godets, this line. And so there was 27 pattern pieces. If you don't number them, you're really going to get them mixed up. We have a side back panel and a back panel. So the side back really resembles the side front, other than the markings of the notches. So you'll see that when you put the 2 sides together, you have 1 double notch. And you also have that same grain line that runs down the center. and cut 2. And then over here, you can see that I have 2 sets of double notches. These are going to attach to the center back, and those notches will match each other. The back is open with a seam allowance and marked where the zipper ends. You always want to have that marked, and then you don't have to measure the zipper every time you're sewing something. You've already got it marked. And then the center back has 3 lined notch. And this is just, I think, very basic tenets of how you work to make sure that everything makes sense later on. You can imagine if you made this pattern and you put it away and you get it out a couple years later, it's very clearly marked. You won't have a problem putting it together. Now, after you've draped your pieces, you're going to want to make sure that you true them up. To true up a pattern, like this one, I'm taking my side panel and I'm laying it over top of my front panel and making sure that my notches line up and that the hem lines up at the bottom. Sometimes you might take your pattern drape pieces off of your mannequin and they don't match up. You have to make some adjustment. And so usually, like when I'm draping, I'll mark the notches, but you want to make sure that you true them up when you get to the paper pattern. And then you'll be cutting this out and sewing the little sample, which is what I showed you on the dress form at the beginning of this video.